Picture this. The year is 1950, and we find ourselves in the heart of a new country, Yugoslavia. Emerging from the ashes of World War II, this freshly minted nation stands as a testament to resilience and unity. At its helm is Josip Broz Tito, a man with a vision of a socialist federation, a dream that would redefine the Balkans. The formation of Yugoslavia, a union of 6 republics, was no small feat. It was a delicate balancing act of diverse cultures, languages, and religions, all under the banner of brotherhood and unity. Tito, with his charismatic leadership and political acumen, managed to keep these disparate elements together, establishing a socialist federation that promised equality and prosperity to all. Yugoslavia, under Tito's rule, was a beacon of non-alignment, refusing to bow to the pressures of the Cold War's superpowers. As we step into the 1950s, Yugoslavia stands as a beacon of hope for a war-torn Europe. As we move through the 1950s and into the 1960s, we find Tito firmly in control. Marshal Josip Broz Tito, the charismatic leader of Yugoslavia, was a master at maintaining balance in a federation that was a patchwork of ethnicities, religions, and historical rivalries. His leadership style was a blend of authoritarianism and socialism, marked by a constant tug-of-war between unity and diversity. Tito's Yugoslavia was an unusual entity in the Cold War era. It was a socialist federation, yet it stood apart from the Eastern Bloc, maintaining its independence from the Soviet Union. Tito's balancing act extended to the international stage as he became a founding member of the non-aligned movement, positioning Yugoslavia between the West and the East. However, beneath this veneer of stability, there were serious cracks. While Tito was celebrated for his charisma and his ability to hold Yugoslavia together, his rule was far from benign. His regime was marked by political repression and human rights abuses. Dissent was not tolerated. Those who opposed the regime or posed a threat to Tito's vision of a unified Yugoslavia often faced imprisonment, or worse. This period saw numerous purges and widespread violations of civil liberties. Among the most notorious crimes of Tito's rule were the mass executions of wartime collaborators and political opponents in the aftermath of World War II. Thousands were killed without trial in what came to be known as the Bleiburg repatriations. These dark chapters in Yugoslavia's history were often swept under the rug, as Tito's government controlled the narrative, focusing on unity and progress. Tito also pursued economic policies that would later contribute to the financial instability of the federation. His vision of worker self-management led to inefficiencies and corruption, setting the stage for the economic struggles that would follow his death. With Tito's death in 1980, the federation faces an uncertain future. Tito's iron fist had kept Yugoslavia's simmering ethnic tensions in check. His passing created a power vacuum and left unanswered questions about the future of the federation. But that's a story for the next chapter. The 1980s bring economic turbulence, inflation soars, and fuel becomes a scarce commodity. Yugoslavia in the 1980s was a nation on the edge. The death of Josip Broz Tito in 1980 left a power vacuum that no one could satisfactorily fill. The unity that Tito had enforced began to crumble, and with it, the economy. The country was riddled with debt, and the government's attempts to service it only worsened the situation. Inflation, the economic villain that erodes purchasing power and cripples economies, became a daily reality for the Yugoslavian people. Prices of goods skyrocketed, often changing multiple times in a single day. A loaf of bread that cost 1 dinar in the morning could cost 10 or even 100 dinars by the evening. This hyperinflation was not just a nuisance, it was devastating. It eroded savings, destabilized businesses, and plunged countless people into poverty. Fuel, the lifeblood of any modern economy, also became a scarce commodity. The country's heavy reliance on imported oil was a double-edged sword. It fueled the industrial growth of the 1960s and 70s, but when the global oil crisis hit in the 1980s, Yugoslavia found itself in a precarious position. The government rationed fuel, but this only led to long lines at petrol stations and an increase in black market activities. The scarcity of fuel had far-reaching effects. It hampered industrial production and transportation, leading to shortages of essential goods. The struggle for resources created tension among the republics, further fracturing the unity that was already hanging by a thread. The economic struggles of the 1980s were not just about numbers on a balance sheet. They were about people. They were about families who couldn't afford a loaf of bread, about businesses that had to close their doors, about communities torn apart by resource conflicts. These struggles painted a grim picture of a country in decline, but they were also a symptom of a deeper issue. The economic instability was a reflection of the political instability. As the unity enforced by Tito disintegrated, so did the economy. As the decade ends, the economic instability creates a fertile ground for political unrest. With the dawn of the 1990s, Yugoslavia is on the brink of collapse. The death of Tito in 1980 left a power vacuum that no one could quite fill. His vision of a unified Yugoslavia, an amalgamation of different ethnicities and religions living harmoniously, started to unravel. Tito's authoritarian rule, while harsh, had kept ethnic tensions at bay. But with his absence, the simmering tensions began to rise to the surface. The intricate tapestry of Yugoslavia, woven together by Tito, was fraying at the edges. The 1980s were marked by a surge in nationalism among the 6 republics. Each republic began to assert its identity and demand greater autonomy. The political instability was palpable. The leadership that followed Tito was weak and fragmented. They struggled to keep the unity intact, but the centrifugal forces of nationalism were too strong. The federal system, designed to balance power among the republics, was coming apart. The ethnic tensions that Tito had suppressed were now openly inflaming public sentiment. The growing discontent was further exacerbated by the severe economic crisis. The escalating inflation and lack of fuel, a hangover from the economic struggles of the 1980s, wreaked havoc on everyday life. The people were restless and the leaders seemed helpless. By the late 1980s, the writing was on the wall. The republics of Slovenia and Croatia, the most prosperous and Western-oriented, were the first to demand independence. The rest of the republics were not far behind. The political instability, ethnic tensions, and economic crisis had created a perfect storm. The stage was set for a series of events that would lead to the disintegration of Yugoslavia. A decade-long series of wars, known as the Yugoslav Wars, would break out, leaving a trail of devastation in its wake. The unity that Tito had so painstakingly built was crumbling, and the dream of a unified Yugoslavia was fading. By the end of 1990, the map of Europe is set to change forever. The story of Yugoslavia from 1950 to 1990 is a turbulent journey of hope, despair, and change. A country born out of the ashes of the Second World War, Yugoslavia was a beacon of hope for many. The charismatic leadership of Josip Broz Tito, a man of iron will and indomitable spirit, steered the nation through the stormy seas of the Cold War. His rule was marked by a unique blend of socialist ideals and nationalist fervor, a balancing act that kept the diverse ethnicities of Yugoslavia together under a single banner. However, beneath the surface of unity and progress, Tito's rule was not without its dark spots. The suppression of political dissent, the silencing of opposition voices, and the systemic abuse of human rights were all part of the story. Yet Tito's charisma and political acumen often overshadowed these transgressions, masking the undercurrents of discontent brewing within the federation. The economic struggles of Yugoslavia were another key facet of its history. The country was beleaguered by rampant inflation and a crippling lack of fuel, making life difficult for its citizens. Despite being rich in natural resources and human capital, the country's economy was marred by mismanagement and corruption, leading to a decline in living standards and a rise in social unrest. And then came the beginning of the end. The death of Tito in 1980 marked the start of a period of instability and uncertainty. The federation that was held together by the force of Tito's personality began to unravel, culminating in the bloody wars of the 1990s that led to the disintegration of Yugoslavia. As we close this chapter of history, we are reminded of the constant ebb and flow of nations and their fortunes. The story of Yugoslavia is a stark reminder that the course of history is shaped by the actions of individuals, the circumstances of the times, and the will of the people. It's a tale that invites reflection and understanding, urging us to learn from the past to navigate the future. Remember, history doesn't just teach us about the past, it enlightens our present and shapes our future. Until next time, keep exploring history's fascinating tales.